what's happening at Northwestern is interesting because it goes beyond just Fitzgerald. This seems to be an athletic-wide department because you'll remember that ACC Commissioner Jim Phillips was the athletics director at Northwestern. Yeah. The guy that they selected, the deputy AD that was going to replace Jim Phillips, ended up not getting the job, or he had the job and then resigned from the job.
Oh, interesting.
Because I believe, I don't have the story in front of me, but I believe it was a cheerleading complaint about harassment and intimidation. And, who knew what when. And then we also have some other stories, like the baseball coach is now suddenly finding himself in it at Northwestern. So this seems like it's more institutional issue than the football program. And if it kind of permeates the athletic department, I do think we're in a situation going into ACC kickoff where the commissioner is going to either have a prepared statement in the filibuster, the swafflebuster, or he's going to do an interview before they actually get to ACC.
This is easier with him.
That's fair point. It just feels that Jim Phillips is yet again going to find himself at an ACC kickoff where he's going to be the focal point in a way that he does not want to be the focal point, because national folks are going to show up for this story to ask him some questions because he was the AD at the time when a lot of these complaints were coming up in Northwestern.
Although, I know that I remember when he got the job, a lot of media people I know nationally like him very much. And so I it'll be interesting to see, I think I wouldn't be surprised if he tries to get out ahead of it a little bit.
I would, yes, you would have to at some point to explain what you knew, what you did not know, when did you receive these complaints and everything else.
I think even if it were just a football issue, right? Like that's such a big component of your athletics department that it wouldn't matter, I don't think, even if it were just the football team. You know what I mean? Like I think people would still have questions because that's such a big part. I mean, each program does sort of tend to be its own entity, culturally speaking and whatever at a school, but like to have your football program have that kind of stuff going on, that's not great.
So there's two offshoot conversations that take place. We don't cover Northwestern. We're not in it every day. Northwestern is a team that occasionally plays Duke in football, and you kind of look at it as a measuring stick.
Again this year.
Although, again, Northwestern's been bad the last couple of years. Very bad. Whereas Duke under Mike Elko has been trending upward, or looks to continue trending upward. So this isn't necessarily about Northwestern. It's about what tends to happen in these stories that bothers me to no end. And the first instance is the classic, but I'm friends with this person. You'll never find a better man than this guy who understands culture. Culture starts getting thrown out a lot. And we see this from the Darren Ravels of the world, Danny because he's a Northwestern guy. He's like, I personally know Pat Fitzgerald. Like, you know him in a different context, my dude. And the same with Danny Cannell. Former quarterback, he's on Sirius XM. He's active on Twitter, and he's like, so now you can just fire people from your couch, as if, and again, it's this odd dismissal of real stories.
Right.
People that are willing to go on the record to explain to you their experience, and you dismiss their experience out of hand because you like the coach or for any other number of really frivolous reasons.
It does. It seemed in the beginning like this was almost becoming another culture war flashpoint.
He's trying to cancel him.
This is cancel culture. I'm like, well, if that happened, like, what do you mean it's cancel culture? Like, well, if he knew about this and like encouraged it, then I don't understand what the issue is. That's literally sexual assault. Like,
just boys.
We're done here.
It's just boys being boys.
Well,
now, right?
And I think that you see this a lot when it comes to issues like sexual assault, whether it's, between men or with men and women or whatever, is there's this notion of like, whether it's an enabler or somebody who helped perpetrate, it's like, oh, I know them. Like they would never do this. And I feel like, I just don't know why we aren't over that at this point. Like we've seen it proven that people swore up and down were like good people, quote unquote, can absolutely do things like this. And if you just deny it because you know them and you think they could never do it, then you're not helping anything. You're like actively hurting people that want to come forward and want to tell their story.
It wasn't my experience. Well, that's your experience.
Like, I'm
Good
sorry.
for you.
You don't see people doing that. Like when someone gets put like on trial for murder or something, well, you do sometimes, but
you do.
Not these types of people as much, like they stay quiet, but sexual assault, no, we can defend enabling that. That's fine.
And
because he's a good person.
Or it's enabling because, he helped us win football games. That's always the thing too.
Not enough.
But not a lot. I mean, they were 111 last year.
Not to say there's a number that should be enough, but it's like sometimes when you see coaches like this and you're like, they should be better for what you're letting them get away with.
And there were two other things that came out of this that made me kind of go like, here we go again. And this is a tale as old as time. It's not just Northwestern. You see this at other institutions. You feel like you can, all right, because the initial punishment for Pat Fitzgerald was 2 weeks. That happened during the dead period. No recruiting visits or anything. It was essentially 2 weeks unpaid vacation in the summer before anything of consequence actually happens for the head coach of a football program.
Right.
So they do an initial 2-week suspension.
Yeah.
And then the Northwestern student paper puts out stories with like actual details that I'm imagining Northwestern paying a legal firm to do this investigation over 6 months knew that these were things that were happening. It just so happened that the paper put it into public record and actually had people go on record, not just anonymous.
Yeah.
And then
they did some journalism.
And then the president of Northwestern goes, oh, well, I initially erred on the initial punishment. This is my decision. I'm going to fire him now. And it just reeks of, oh, we thought this would get swept under the rug and
100%.
people would move on with their lives and then we could just go about our business. And it's that culture of, I don't want to know. Let's just hope it goes away.
Yes.
Rather than taking matters into your own hand at first. This happens at institutions all the time, and it makes things incredibly difficult on themselves. For what? Because people end up getting more. There's more aftermath in these events.
I know.
Than had they just initially taken care of it the first time.
I don't know why they do it. I don't know. I guess they just assume it won't come out, or maybe they just figure like, surely they won't talk to people about this or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
The culture of fear will win out.
The culture of no, that's a good way of putting it. Yeah. And they just assume they won't want to tell their story. But I think, yeah, they got tired of the way it was being swept under the rug. And that's part of why they did.
And the last part of this that is mildly infuriating from our perspective, from a media perspective, we got Stuart Mandel of The Athletic. He retweeted Awful announcing their story about how Northwestern student newspaper was lauded for breaking the football hazing story. So Mandel decides to use this as an opportunity to say, don't be fooled by the cranky sports journalism dying tweets. Mind you, we had ESPN and all their layoffs. The New York Times sports department
literally ended their sports department.
Just done. So that they could make The Athletic.
The day before this tweet was sent.
Yes. So the future has never been brighter because the talent I've seen coming out of colleges over the past several years has never been stronger. That's Stuart Mandel.
P.S.
And that was his takeaway.
Stuart is very nice. Like I've interacted with him. Sure, very nice person.
But also very naive.
Yeah.
Stuart's always been a very naive person to me. And
okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Always. And again, I've interacted with him very, very limited times at like ACC kickoff and whatnot. Again, incredibly nice guy, but he's always come across as, man, you really think that it's one way, but it's the other way. And what?
Right.
So to his point, that student journalism has never been better.
I don't doubt it. There's a ton of talented people out there.
There's always been talent.
Yes.
Okay. And maybe I'm biased about this because I've stuck around in this area for a very long time and I've seen people come through and you've seen people come through both the Daily Tar Heel and the Technician and the Duke Chronicle. And they've all gone on to really good jobs, but there's a consistency. It's not a talent issue. It is where are they going to go when they leave college as the media industry continues to contract? Number one. Number two, the talented folks, at least on the print side or the written side, there's a consistent effort to burn you out.
Burnout is such a huge issue in, especially like you said, print and digital to a lesser degree. But yes,
you and I both know plenty of talented writers who, if things were different and the industry was actually healthy, unlike what Stuart Mandel is trying to point out, would actually be a columnist for 30 years. They'd be in the business for a very long time. Instead, what I'm seeing is a consistent, basically, people coming out of college, at least locally, people coming out of college and going in one of two directions. They either...
in their early 20s, they can do the job.
No kids.
Right.
Also,
then they settle down and things get different because they have to make more money, to live.
Also, there's you got to make money to live, number one, or sometimes people come from a position of privilege and they're able to go be an intern somewhere. They're able to go write for cheap because they get financial support from a parent or a spouse. Now, again,
I had that.
I had that too. Yeah. Okay. So these are things that and I recognize that I'm probably not able to have the career that I have without A, my parents, B, with Kelly.
Right.
So not everybody gets that. All right. So there are plenty of talented people that are coming out, but ultimately you got to make a living. And the conditions right now are not conducive for that talent to go make a living and stick with it. So you see one of two things happen. They do it, they burn out in their 20s, and then they get out of the game completely because there's no future for them.
Right.
Or they go to TV. But as we're coming to find out, TV is not so great either.
Or they work for schools.
Or they work for schools.
Which is more money.
Or
right.
a team,
or a
for that
team.
matter.
Exactly.
So look, again, I'm not trying to bang on Stewart here too much, but I saw that. It's like, buddy, read the room, man.
Yeah, and I was going to say, like, the stuff we were talking about too was just national. Like, that's not even saying all the local stuff that's happened all over the country. It's not just here, like where newsrooms are cutting back and whatever, and sports is often the first to go.